You wake to the sound of groaning wood, the sea heaving, and the unmistakable smell of human misery. Congratulations, you've survived your first night as a pirate. Bad news? You've survived your first night as a pirate, and your bedroom is the belly of a rotting wooden beast. Forget the romantic paintings of pirate ships cutting through turquoise waves with jaunty flags and salty charm. The reality is you're wedged into a hammock that smells like the last 3 people who died in it. There is no mattress, no clean sheet, no fluffy pillow, just a grimy strip of canvas slung between 2 beams that creak with every swell. The hammock rocks, not gently like a cradle, but violently like a cradle strapped to a drunk elephant on ice skates. Around you, men snore, cough, and mutter in their sleep. The air is so thick with sweat, smoke, and bilge stench that it feels like you're inhaling soup. There are no windows below deck, just a suffocating darkness pierced by the occasional flicker of a tar-soaked lantern. The flame spits and smokes, adding to the atmosphere of choking gloom. You'd think the sea would smell fresh, clean, even invigorating. But down here the scent of salt is buried under layers of rotting wood, mildew, unwashed bodies, stale beer, and rats. Always rats. Oh yes, you're never alone. Rats scamper across beams above your head, nibble the crumbs from last night's hardtack, and sometimes take liberties with your bare toes if you don't keep them tucked in. Lice thrive in every seam of your clothing, bedbugs feast in the hammocks, and fleas ride in with the rats. You are living inside a mobile zoo where you're both the zookeeper and the exhibit. The ceiling is so low you can't even stand upright. To move through the sleeping quarters you hunch like a broken marionette, tripping over hammocks, kicking buckets of waste that slosh dangerously, and smacking your head on beams every 3rd step. Privacy doesn't exist. You're shoulder to shoulder, knee to knee, and sometimes face to armpit with your fellow brothers of the sea. Forget the idea of personal space. You've just joined the most intimate, unwilling cuddle party in history. And then there's the constant rocking. It never stops. Even when you think you've adjusted, a sudden lurch sends your stomach churning. Seasickness is not a one-time initiation, it's a daily torment. The smell of vomit mingles with everything else, soaked into the planks of the deck, permanently part of the decor. You gag, you retch, you swear you'll never eat again, and then they hand you a wormy biscuit for breakfast. Noise is another joy. Ships groan like living creatures, the timbers bending and protesting against waves that slam endlessly into the hull. Chains rattle, water sloshes, men curse, snores erupt like dying walruses, and somewhere above, the lookout yells incomprehensible warnings. Sleep isn't really sleep, it's dozing in a state of semi-alert exhaustion, ready to leap up if the cry of "sail ho" sends everyone scrambling for battle stations. Speaking of leaping up, good luck with that. When the bell rings, you're expected to tumble out of your hammock in seconds. Miss your mark and you'll be trampled by 40 pairs of filthy bare feet, each belonging to a man who hasn't washed in weeks, and is carrying enough fungal infection to qualify as his own botanical garden. And the worst part? This is normal. This is your life now. Forget lazy mornings or quiet coffee rituals. You live inside a damp wooden coffin filled with groaning men, swarming vermin, and the constant threat that the whole thing might crack open and drown you at any moment. Pirate life doesn't start with a treasure map. It starts here, in the bowels of the ship, where every creak and cough reminds you that the ocean is infinite, and you are trapped in a box made of timber, tar, and human despair. You wanted adventure? You found it. And already you're wondering how long you'll last. You've somehow survived the night in the belly of the ship. You've been bitten, scratched, smoked out, trampled and rattled awake by every creak of the hull. And now, as the lanterns above sputter out and a greyish light creeps through the hatch, you are informed it is time for breakfast. The word breakfast might conjure something warm in your mind, maybe porridge, eggs, bread, perhaps even a cup of coffee. On a pirate ship, though, it means facing one of the greatest enemies of survival, food that hates you back. The hardtack horror. The centerpiece of your pirate breakfast is a biscuit called hardtack. Biscuit is a generous word. It's more like a chunk of fossilized wood that someone cursed into existence. Hardtack is flour, water and salt baked into a square so hard it could shatter a tooth, and you'll have to gnaw at it like a starving dog. But there's a catch. These biscuits aren't just hard, they're alive. By the time you get your share, they've been in the ship's stores for months, sometimes years. Each hardtack is riddled with tiny tunnels made by weevils, little beetles that burrow through the flour and leave behind wriggling surprises. If you hold your ration to the light, you can see the bugs squirming. If you're lucky, the bugs are dead. If you're not, they wriggle across your lips as you try to chew. Pirates sometimes joked that you didn't need extra protein, the weevils provided it. Some burned their biscuits over flames to kill the bugs, which only made them smell like scorched hair. Others dipped the biscuit in beer until it turned soggy enough to choke down. Either way, every bite tastes like mold, salt, and regret. Beer for breakfast, and speaking of beer, yes, you're drinking before sunrise. Not because pirates were merry alcoholics, though many were, but because fresh water doesn't last on a ship. Stored in barrels, it quickly turns green and slimy with algae. So beer, or more often a thin ale, is safer to drink. Except the barrels leak. The beer sours. Sometimes it tastes like vinegar, sometimes it's crawling with worms. You gulp it down anyway because thirst is worse. Imagine starting your day with wormy bread and rotten beer. It's less champion's breakfast and more apocalyptic survival ration. And yet, this is normal. Meat and maggots. If you're lucky, breakfast might also include salted meat. That sounds promising until you see it. Huge hunks of beef or pork are kept in barrels of brine for months at a time. By the time it reaches your plate, it's grey, slimy and crawling with maggots. Some pirates scraped the worms away. Most didn't bother. The maggots ate the rot, so eating them was seen as part of the deal. Salted fish was no better. Picture chewing on a piece of leathery, salty shoe, except the shoe smells like it died twice. Add a bit of mold on top, and you're close to the pirate diet. A stomach-churning stew. On special mornings, the cook might throw odds and ends into a pot. Stale peas, rancid meat scraps, greasy fat, and boil them into something resembling stew. The smell is halfway between sewage and burnt onions. The taste is worse. But hot food feels like a luxury, and after chewing on rocks for days, a slimy ladleful of mush almost feels comforting. Almost. Except you know better. Because everything the cook touches tastes of smoke, filth, and seawater. The galley isn't a kitchen, it's a fire pit inside a wooden box that could ignite at any moment. The cook works surrounded by smoke, soot, and buckets of crawling meat. He's missing fingers from accidents you don't want to imagine, and his ladle hasn't been cleaned in years. The smell of breakfast. If you could step back and take in the scent of a pirate breakfast, it would knock you off your feet. Rotting grain, sour beer, fish, smoke, sweat, and bilge water all mingling in the air. Add vomit from the seasick and the sweet smell of unwashed bodies, and you have the world's worst perfume. It clings to you, coats your tongue, and burrows into your clothes. You'll smell like it forever. And don't forget, this is a communal meal. You're not dining in peace. You're eating shoulder to shoulder with 50 other men, all chewing loudly, scratching themselves, spitting bones onto the floor and shouting over the din. One man slurps beer from a cracked mug, another gnaws on a wormy biscuit, while two more get into an argument about who stole whose ration. The sound of teeth snapping on rock-hard bread mixes with curses, laughter, and coughing fits. Meals aren't just about survival, they're contests. Who can choke down the maggots without flinching? Who can drink the sourest beer without gagging? Who dares to mock the cook to his face? It's crude theatre, and you're a reluctant actor. Food fights and punishments. Sometimes these breakfasts evolve into chaos. A wormy biscuit hurled across the room, a mug shattered against a skull, a fight over the last scrap of salted pork turning into a brawl with knives. Captains tried to keep order, but in the belly of the ship, breakfast was often a powder keg, and if you were unlucky enough to spill your food or waste it, the punishment was worse than hunger. Pirate justice for wasting rations could include beatings or worse, going without for the day. Why you wouldn't survive? Let's be honest, you wouldn't make it past the first bite. The weevils would crawl out of the biscuit, the maggots would wriggle in the meat, the sour beer would burn your throat, and your stomach would revolt before you'd swallowed a thing. Meanwhile, the pirates around you would eat it like nothing was wrong, smacking their lips and slurping with relish. And if you turned up your nose, they'd mock you, shove the food back in your face, or worse, brand you as weak. On a pirate ship, weakness is death. You don't get to be picky. You don't get to complain. You eat what's in front of you, vermin and all, or you starve. So breakfast becomes a ritual of endurance, a test of willpower. Every bite is a reminder that survival isn't glamorous. It's chewing through filth while pretending you don't notice. It's swallowing bugs with a straight face. It's washing it down with rotten beer and calling it nourishment. That's pirate life. And you wouldn't survive it. If you've managed to choke down your breakfast of worms and vinegar, congratulations, you're officially a pirate now, or at least you haven't been tossed overboard yet. But don't get too comfortable. You might have heard that pirates lived in freedom, escaping the strict rules of navy ships, roaming the seas with nothing but liberty, brotherhood, and rum. And while that makes for good Hollywood, the truth is stranger and a lot scarier. Pirates lived by codes, not laws, not kings, not parliaments, but by their own handwritten rules, the so-called Articles of Agreement. In theory, this was pirate democracy. Every man had a voice. In practice, it was a game of fear, violence, and constant reminders that you are one mistake away from becoming shark food. The Pirate Code, a rotten constitution. You've probably heard the phrase, the Pirate Code. Sounds noble, doesn't it? A secret constitution written by rogues, and to some degree it was. Before joining a crew, pirates had to swear on the articles, a list of rules that could include anything from how loot was divided to what happened if you stole from a fellow shipmate. A captain was often elected by his crew, not appointed by a king. That sounds radical for the 17th century, until you realize what you're actually voting for is which violent, unstable man you want screaming at you when cannonballs start flying. If he lost the crew's favor, he could be voted out and replaced. Pirate democracy was less about freedom and more about mob rule, where popularity was measured in intimidation. And then there were the punishments. The articles spelled them out in detail, and they were not gentle. Steal from another man's share, and you might lose an ear. Cheat at dice, and you might lose your fingers. Betray the ship, and you'll lose your life. The code was less a guarantee of rights and more a catalogue of creative ways you might suffer. Flogging, the pirate morning routine. Let's say you overslept, or worse, you spilled water on the powder, rendering the cannons useless. On land, you'd be chewed out by your boss. On a pirate ship, you'd be flogged. That meant being tied to the mast while the crew took turns whipping your back with ropes, belts, or cat-o'-nine-tails. A whip made of knotted cords, sometimes weighted with metal. The blows tore skin, muscle, and pride. The worst part? Everyone watched. Discipline wasn't private. It was performance. Your screams were meant to teach everyone else a lesson. Don't mess up, or this could be you. And if you fainted from pain, they'd toss seawater over you and keep going. Kyle hauling, a pirate's nightmare. But flogging was child's play compared to the ultimate terror, Kyle hauling. If the crew decided you'd broken the code badly enough, they'd tie a rope around your waist, throw you overboard, and drag you under the ship's barnacle-encrusted hull. Barnacles are sharp as glass. As you were pulled across, they shredded your skin, cut deep into muscle, sometimes down to the bone. Many drowned before they came back up. Those who survived were mangled for life. And here's the kicker. Kyle hauling wasn't always fatal by accident. Sometimes it was meant to be. If they wanted you alive, they might pull you up half dead. If they wanted you gone, they'd keep dragging until the sea claimed you. Either way, you'd never look at a ship's hull the same way again. Marooning, a slow execution. Another favorite punishment was marooning. If the crew decided you'd betrayed them, they'd row you to a barren island, give you a pistol with one shot, and leave you. One shot for food, for defense, or for yourself. No water, no shelter, just you and the burning sun. Pirates feared marooning almost as much as hanging, because it meant a slow death by thirst or madness. And you didn't have to betray the crew to earn this fate. Sometimes being annoying was enough, too many complaints, too much whining, or just being weak, and the vote might go against you. That was democracy, pirate style. Democracy, but not for you. Here's the funny part. Pirates bragged about equality. Every man got a share of plunder, not just officers. Captains couldn't abuse their power without risking a mutiny. Compared to life in the Navy, where sailors were beaten daily and fed sawdust bread, pirate life could feel almost fair. But don't mistake this for freedom. Pirate democracy only worked if you were tough, loud, and mean enough to keep your place in the hierarchy. The quiet ones, the weak ones, the ones who gagged on their maggot stew, those men had no voice. Your vote was only as strong as your fists. And if you lost the vote, there were plenty of punishments waiting. Pirates were equal in theory, but in practice, fear ruled the deck. Every man was watching the others, waiting for weakness, ready to strike before being struck. The captain and the quartermaster. On most ships, authority was split between the captain and the quartermaster. The captain commanded during battle, but the quartermaster managed daily life, food rations, discipline, division of loot. That meant two bosses to displease, two men whose wrath could end your career or your life. The quartermaster in particular held terrifying power. He could punish you for laziness, insubordination, or just looking at him the wrong way. He was both judge and executioner. Imagine your worst supervisor at work. Now give him a cutlass, a pistol, and the full support of 50 armed lunatics. That was your quartermaster. Why you wouldn't survive? Let's be honest, you wouldn't last a week. The first time you flinched at the sight of worms in your biscuit, The crew would brand you weak. The first time you hesitated to haul a rope, you'd be accused of laziness. The first time you spoke out of turn, the quartermaster would make an example of you. You'd be flogged for mistakes, marooned for weakness, and probably keel-hauled just for the entertainment value. Pirate democracy wasn't about freedom. It was about survival in a floating prison with no walls. You followed the code, you obeyed the mob, and you prayed the crew's anger didn't turn on you. And even if you survived the punishments, the fear would gnaw at you every day. Every shout, every glare, every whisper could mean the end. You thought you were free when you boarded this ship. In reality, you stepped into one of the harshest, most brutal systems of order in history. So sit down, shut up, and try not to draw attention, because the next punishment might have your name on it. If you thought surviving breakfast and avoiding the quartermaster's whip earned you a break, you've misunderstood pirate life. There are no breaks. A pirate ship is not a floating tavern or a pleasure cruise. It's a living, groaning machine made of wood, rope, and sweat. And that machine never sleeps, which means neither do you. The fantasy is that pirates lounged on deck, swigging rum, singing songs, waiting for treasure ships to drift into view. The truth? Pirates worked harder than most farmers. The sea doesn't care that you want adventure. The sea tears sails, rots ropes, splits planks, and leaks into every seam. Your life becomes endless labor just to keep the ship afloat long enough to chase someone else's misfortune. Ropes, ropes, and more ropes. From the moment you stagger topside, you are handed a rope. Everything on a ship comes down to ropes, coiling them, hauling them, tying them, replacing them, untangling them. If you don't know your knots, you're useless. And if you tie the wrong one, you could doom the ship. The lines are thick, stiff with salt, and reek of tar. Your hands blister and bleed as you haul them over pulleys, your shoulders straining with every heave. A missed step can mean the rope whipping back into your face, or yanking you clear off the deck into the hungry sea. The men around you work like machines, barefoot, scarred, muttering curses. You're expected to keep pace, and when you can't, the quartermaster's glare finds you. Scrub till you bleed. When you're not hauling rope, you're scrubbing. The deck must be scoured constantly, not for cleanliness but to keep rot from eating through the wood. So you're on your knees, sand and seawater in hand, scraping every inch of timber. It wears through your skin until your palms are raw, your fingernails torn, your back screaming. And you don't scrub once a day, you scrub whenever the quartermaster decides the deck looks slimy, which, on a ship full of vomit, blood, fish guts and spilled beer, is always sails like giants. The sails are your wings, and they never rest. A storm tears them to ribbons. Calm seas leave them sagging. Constant wind strains the stitching. And who patches them? You. Picture clinging to a swaying mast, knife between your teeth, canvas whipping around you like a living monster. The height is dizzying. The sea below roars like a hungry beast. One slip, and you're gone, snapped like driftwood, swallowed before anyone notices. Pirates fell from masts all the time. The ship didn't stop. You were another piece of flotsam. If you make it down alive, the stitching begins. You sit cross-legged on rough canvas, pushing needles the size of daggers through stiff, tarred cloth, your hands raw, your eyes stinging with salt and smoke, and just when you finish one repair, another tear appears. The bilge, hell's basement. Every ship leaks. Pirates didn't have pristine dry hulls. They had bilges, the lowest, darkest part of the ship, always filled with a few feet of seawater, human waste, rotting food, and God knows what else. And somebody had to bail it out. That somebody is often you. Imagine climbing into a coffin-shaped pit, ankle-deep in slime, scooping out water with a bucket as rats scuttle over your boots and the stench claws your lungs. The bilge water is poisonous, thick with bacteria. Stay down there too long and your skin breaks into sores. Breathe too deep and you catch fevers that kill faster than a sword. Ship repairs at sea, and then there's carpentry. Pirate ships were constantly falling apart. Planks warped, nails rusted, beams split. You're expected to hammer, saw, tar, and patch on the fly. A hole in the hull meant the difference between plunder and death. And you don't get to say, I don't know how. You learn, or you drown. The tools are crude, the wood is warped, and every blow of the hammer rattles through the groaning body of the ship like a dying heartbeat. Repairs never last. You're always patching, always improvising, always watching the sea try to kill you one leak at a time. Never enough hands. A pirate ship rarely had enough crew. Raiding ships, desertion, disease, and death thinned numbers constantly. So every man did triple duty. You hauled ropes, mended sails, stood watch, manned cannons, scrubbed decks, and bailed bilge. Day after day, hour after hour. Sleep was stolen in scraps. Rest was a luxury you couldn't afford. Weather is the real captain. And then comes the weather. In calm seas you sweat under blistering sun, sails sagging, the crew listless and irritable, your skin cracking into salt sores. In storms you are lashed by rain, blinded by spray, clinging to ropes as the ship bucks like a wild beast. Lightning splits the sky, waves slam the hull. Every man is screaming, hauling, praying the mast doesn't snap and crush them all. You're not fighting for treasure in these moments. You're fighting for survival. And more often than not, the sea wins. Why you wouldn't survive? Let's face it, you wouldn't last a morning. Your hands would blister from ropes. Your back would give out scrubbing decks. Your stomach would turn in the bilge. And the first time you climbed a mast in high winds, you'd be plucked off like a fly and swallowed whole by the sea. Pirate life wasn't a holiday. It was ceaseless, grinding labor. Every creak of timber demanded your sweat. Every rope demanded your strength. Every leak demanded your blood. Work was survival, and survival never ended. So the next time you dream of sailing with pirates, remember, before you even touch treasure, you'll be on your knees with a bucket, scrubbing someone else's vomit into the sea, and you won't survive it. You've hauled the ropes, scrubbed the planks, and endured the bilge. You're blistered, sunburnt, and ready to collapse. Too bad, because now the lookout has spotted a sail on the horizon, and the cry goes out across the deck, "Sail ho!" Your stomach lurches, the ship springs to life, and in seconds you realize that all the misery so far has only been the warm-up act. The real nightmare is about to begin. Battle. Cannons and chaos. Forget the clean cinematic vision of pirates firing cannons in neat rows. In reality, battle is chaos. Cannons were iron monsters that had to be hauled into place with ropes, loaded with powder and shot, rammed tight and primed with a fuse. Every step could kill you. Powder spilled, one spark, and the gun explodes in your face. Cannon misfires. It might burst apart, shredding your crew. The noise is indescribable. Each blast is thunder inside a wooden coffin. Your ears ring, your teeth rattle, your chest feels like it's being torn apart. Smoke pours across the deck, thick and choking. You can't see 5 feet in front of you, only the silhouettes of screaming men and the glow of sparks. The recoil is violent. Each cannon slams back on its wheels like a charging bull. If you don't leap out of the way, it'll crush you against the bulkhead. And while you're dodging, you're also shoving the thing back into place for the next shot. Splinters like bullets. You imagine cannonballs blasting through ships, smashing timbers and men alike. That's true, but the real killer is splinters. When a cannonball slams into a wooden hull, it sends razor-sharp splinters flying in every direction. They're not tiny slivers. They're shards as long as your arm, moving faster than arrows. They slice through flesh, shatter bones, and impale anyone in their path. A battle deck isn't just full of cannon smoke. It's full of blood. Men scream, stumble, collapse with splinters buried in their guts. There's no time to stop. You step over bodies, you keep loading, because if you hesitate, you'll join them, boarding the enemy. If your ship manages to cripple the enemy's sails or smash their rudder, the next order is boarding. And here's where pirate myths come alive, and then immediately die. Boarding is not heroic, it's madness. Grappling hooks fly across the gap, ropes pull taut as ships slam side to side. The deck beneath your feet lurches. Then, with a roar, men surge across the gap with cutlasses, pistols, and axes. You're shoved forward with them, whether you like it or not. Pistols are single shot, barely accurate, and often misfire, so after one blast you're in hand-to-hand combat. Rusty swords clash, axes swing, knives stab. It's close, brutal, and filthy. You don't fight like a gentleman. You bite, gouge, and smash whatever you can reach. The deck becomes slick with blood and vomit. You don't see enemies as people. You see them as obstacles between you and staying alive. Death on all sides, and the terror is everywhere. Gunfire explodes in your ears. Men fall screaming, clutching wounds that spill across the deck. Some are pushed overboard, vanishing into the sea with no hope of rescue. Others are trapped between ships, crushed as the hulls slam together. You hear bones snapping, men shrieking, and you know it could be you any second. There's no retreat. If you try to hang back, the quartermaster will shove you forward at gunpoint. Pirates didn't forgive cowards. They killed them. Better to die in battle than to be branded weak if you lose. And here's the part nobody tells you. If your crew loses, your fate is worse than death. Pirates captured by enemy navies or merchant ships were rarely spared. You might be cut down in the chaos, or worse, taken prisoner. Prisoners could be tortured for information, chained in holds until they starved, or executed outright. And if you were lucky enough to survive all that, you'd eventually find yourself at the gallows, a rope around your neck, your body left to rot in a gibbet as a warning to others. If you win, winning isn't glorious either. Yes, the ship is yours. Yes, you cheer as the enemy surrenders. But then comes the looting, a frenzy of desperate men clawing for anything valuable. Gold and jewels? Rare. Most of the time you're taking cloth, food, tools or barrels of rum. And even in victory, the deck is a butcher's yard, littered with corpses, severed limbs and blood pooling between the planks. You don't feel triumph, you feel sick. You've survived by stepping over bodies and hoping the next cannonball didn't have your name on it. Why you wouldn't survive? Let's be honest, you wouldn't make it past the first cannon blast. The smoke would blind you, the noise would shatter your nerves, and the recoil would knock you flat. You'd freeze as splinters ripped through the air, and when the order came to board, you'd hesitate for just a second, long enough for someone to cut you down where you stood. Pirate battles weren't about skill or honor, they were meat grinders. Chaos, smoke, blood and terror. The survivors weren't heroes, they were the ones who happened to dodge death for another day. And you'd be the one with a splinter the size of a spear in your chest, left behind as the sea swallowed another unlucky fool. The cannons have fallen silent, the smoke drifts away. You're alive somehow. You stagger across the deck, your ears ringing, your stomach turning, your clothes stiff with blood and salt. You think you've earned rest, a chance to recover, to breathe. But life at sea doesn't believe in mercy, because between the roaring battles and desperate chases lies the real pirate life. Boredom, filth, sickness and storms. It turns out that the stretches without treasure are worse than the moments of chaos. At least in battle, adrenaline keeps you moving. In the long empty days between raids, all you have left is misery, the endless waiting. Most days, nothing happens. You drift across vast stretches of sea, horizon empty in every direction. The sun beats down mercilessly, the sails hang slack in calm weather, the ship barely moving. You sit on deck, squinting into the distance, hoping for a sail. Days pass, weeks, nothing. The monotony is unbearable. Pirates gamble with dice, cheat and fight when caught. They carve crude tattoos into their skin with gunpowder and knives. They drink what little rum remains, argue over women they'll never see again, and sing bawdy songs just to fill the silence. And then there's you, trying not to lose your mind. The sea is endless, the sky unchanging. You start to feel like you've fallen off the map of the world. The gambling and fighting. Without distraction, tempers flare. Dice games turn into knife fights. Men draw lots over scraps of food, then brawl until blood spills. Fists, teeth and blades all come into play. There's no referee, just the quartermaster deciding when to break it up. And sometimes he doesn't. Pirates bled for fun. Brawls were entertainment, a way to remind each other that violence was never far away. And you'd be caught in the middle of one before you knew it. A stray elbow, a bump in the crowd, and suddenly someone's accusing you of cheating. Good luck convincing him otherwise. Disease creeps in. While you wait for prey, something else stalks the ship. Disease. You're living in filth. Men cough constantly, their lungs rattling with pneumonia. Dysentery sweeps through, leaving everyone weak, groaning and rushing for buckets. Cuts from rope or knives fester into pus-filled wounds. And scurvy, the dreaded disease of the sea, wastes men away. Scurvy starts with bleeding gums and loose teeth. Then your legs swell, your skin bruises, your bones ache. Eventually, you can't stand. Pirates carried no fresh fruit. Their diets of salt meat and wormy biscuits meant scurvy claimed them in droves. You'd think pirates might treat the sick with sympathy. They didn't. The sick were dead weight. If you couldn't work, you risked being thrown overboard. And even if they let you rot in your hammock, the smell of your decay seeped into everyone's lungs. Storms at sea. And then come the storms. The ocean does not care if you're tired, hungry or sick. It hurls waves the size of buildings against your ship, tearing sails, snapping masts and tossing men like dolls. You find yourself clinging to a rope, rain lashing your face, lightning blinding you. The ship bucks like a wild beast. Every wave threatens to capsize you. Men scream, vanish over the side, swallowed by the dark. The deck is a river, water streaming ankle deep. You bail with buckets, you haul ropes, you beg whatever god is listening. The storm doesn't last minutes, it lasts hours, sometimes days, and when it finally ends, you're left with broken masts, torn sails, missing men, and the knowledge that it will all happen again. Shore leave and disappointment. You might think shore leave was a reprieve, a chance to bathe, rest, and eat fresh food. Sometimes yes, but more often pirates came ashore only long enough to raid a village, steal supplies, or drink themselves into oblivion. Diseases spread faster on land than at sea. Drunken brawls ended in knife fights, and every port was full of spies, eager to sell pirates out to the nearest navy patrol. So even when your feet touched dirt, you weren't safe. You were just waiting for the next disaster. Why you wouldn't survive? The truth is, you'd never make it through the waiting. You'd rot in the heat, your skin burning under the sun. You'd gag at the stench of sick men, vomit at the sight of scurvy swollen gums. You'd lose your nerve in the gambling fights, your life over a rigged throw of dice. And the storm would claim you, your hands too soft to cling to the ropes, your prayers lost in the thunder. Between raids, pirates lived in misery. They endured endless boredom punctuated by sudden violence. Their bodies wasted away, their minds broke, and their souls rotted. You wanted treasure, you got filth. You wanted freedom, you got chains made of disease and despair, and you wouldn't survive it. You've survived the boredom, the gambling brawls, and the endless storms, or at least you think you have. But now a new enemy creeps in, one you can't fight with cutlasses or cannons. It doesn't roar like the ocean or crack like thunder. It whispers through your blood, festers in your gums, and eats you alive from the inside out. Welcome to the sickness of the sea, scurvy, the pirate's curse. It starts quietly. You notice your gums are tender, your teeth ache when you bite into hardtack. Then your legs feel weak, bruises appear out of nowhere, and your skin turns the color of old parchment. You don't know it yet, but your body is starving for vitamin C, something nobody in the 17th century had ever heard of. Soon your gums swell and bleed, your teeth loosen and fall out one by one, clattering into your bowl of wormy stew. Your muscles waste away, your bones ache, and every step feels like walking on knives. Pirates called it the rot, because men literally rotted where they lay. And it's everywhere. Hammocks sag under the weight of scurvy-ridden men moaning in the dark, their bodies covered in sores. The stench is unforgettable, a mix of blood, pus, and unwashed flesh. There is no cure at sea, only despair. Dysentery, the deck runs red. If scurvy doesn't get you, dysentery might. Imagine 50 men sharing 2 buckets as toilets. The buckets slosh with every wave. The stench seeps into the wood, the ropes, the hammocks. One sip of contaminated water, one bite of spoiled meat, and you're doubled over with cramps. Then comes the blood. Dysentery doesn't politely fade away. It empties you until you're too weak to stand. You lie in your hammock shaking, while your crewmates mutter about the smell. Pirates weren't gentle caregivers. If you couldn't haul a rope, you weren't useful. Many men with dysentery simply wasted away, abandoned in the dark, their last moments spent in filth and humiliation. Fever and pestilence. The sea is a breeding ground for fevers. Pneumonia sweeps through damp hammocks, leaving men wheezing and coughing blood. Typhus rides in on lice. One sick man becomes 10. 10 become 20. Soon half the ship is down, hacking, sweating, groaning in unison like a chorus of the damned. And the worst part, nobody knows what causes it. Pirates whisper of curses, bad luck, or angry gods. The cook burns herbs in the galley, filling the ship with smoke. The quartermaster threatens to throw the sick overboard. Nothing works. The fever burns through the crew until it decides to stop. Gangrene, rotting alive. Then there are the injuries. Every rope burn, splinter or knife cut is a doorway to infection. You nick your hand on a rusty nail, it swells, turns red, then black. The smell comes next, sweet, sickly, unmistakable, gangrene. There are no doctors here, only surgeons, and most of them are failed barbers with a hacksaw and a bottle of rum. If your wound festers, they cut it off. Arm, leg, finger, doesn't matter. They strap you down, pour rum in your mouth, and saw until you pass out, or scream yourself hoarse. If you survive, you live crippled. If you don't, you're tossed into the sea before you can stink up the ship. The syphilis plague. Of course, when pirates did get shore leave, they often brought back something extra, syphilis. The French disease, they called it. It started as sores, then spread into madness. Men raved, sang nonsense, and clawed their own skin until they bled. And on a ship where everyone shared hammocks, food and sweat, it spread like wildfire. Some crews were so diseased that half the men on board were already dying before they ever raised a sail. You can imagine the smell, or rather, you shouldn't. The surgeon's table. If you're unlucky enough to land on the surgeon's table, you'll pray for death. The surgery is a plank with ropes to tie you down. The tools are knives, saws, and branding irons. There's no anesthesia, just rum, maybe opium if you're lucky. The surgeon's apron is stiff with old blood. The bucket beside him is filled with limbs. And then it's your turn. A saw grinds through bone. Your screams mix with the groaning of the hull. When it's done, the stump is cauterized with a red-hot iron. The smell of burning flesh fills the cabin. If you survive, the pain lingers forever. If you don't, your body joins the others in the sea. Why you wouldn't survive? Let's be honest, you wouldn't last a week in this floating plague house. The first time your gums bled, you'd panic. The first time you saw maggots crawling in a wound, you'd faint. And the first time the surgeon's saw touched your skin, you'd beg for the sea instead. Pirates weren't just fighting kings and navies, they were fighting their own bodies. Every breath carried risk, every meal carried poison, every wound carried death. And you'd be the one rotting in a hammock, your crewmates stepping over your body, waiting for the splash as they tossed you overboard. So, after surviving dysentery buckets, scurvy gums and the ship's surgeon with his blood-stained saw, maybe you're thinking, fine, but at least it's all worth it for the treasure, right? Gold doubloons, glittering emeralds, overflowing chests, X marks the spot, parrots perched on shoulders, the whole thing straight out of a Hollywood poster. Well, brace yourself for disappointment, because the truth is treasure at sea wasn't really treasure at all. It was more like a yard sale in hell, and you'd kill yourself hauling it before you ever saw a single gold coin. The myth of chests of gold. Let's start with the big one. No, pirates did not routinely dig holes on tropical beaches, bury chests of gold, and leave maps with convenient little X's on them. That entire idea comes from a novel, Treasure Island, written in the 1880s, centuries after the golden age of piracy. Robert Louis Stevenson gave the world the buried chest myth, and Hollywood did the rest. Real pirates were far too practical and far too greedy to bury their loot. They spent it as fast as they got it. The average pirate life expectancy was less than 5 years once they turned outlaw. Why would you bury your winnings if you knew you might be hanged next week? Instead, treasure was usually divided up the second it was captured. The captain and quartermaster got extra shares, officers got a bit more, and the rest was split among the crew. And the loot, it wasn't neat stacks of gold coins. It was whatever they could grab. Treasure was mostly junk. So what did pirate treasure actually look like? Imagine the world's least glamorous flea market. Barrels of salted fish, bales of tobacco, bags of sugar and flour, coils of rope, stacks of canvas, maybe some lumber. Anything that could be sold at the next port for rum and women was treasure. Sure, occasionally there were coins, but coins were heavy, bulky and risky to carry. A chest full of silver reals could weigh hundreds of pounds, and if you were captured, possession of a bag of gold was a death sentence. Proof you'd taken a ship. So more often than not, treasure was boring stuff. Indigo dye, cotton, copper pots, sometimes just the ship itself. Pirates often valued captured vessels more than anything inside them. If the rigging was good and the sails weren't rotten, congratulations, you'd just found the best loot imaginable, the curse of silver. Even when pirates did get precious metals, it wasn't the glittering dragon hoard you imagine. Spanish galleons did indeed transport silver by the ton from South America to Europe. But silver wasn't neatly minted coins. It was massive ingots weighing 40 or 50 pounds each. Picture yourself hauling one of those down a gangplank in the Caribbean sun. No treasure chest, just a sweaty chain gang of pirates grunting under giant slabs of metal. Drop one on your foot, and congratulations, you'll be hobbling on gangrene before the week's out. And if the Spanish Navy caught you with one of those bars, you weren't getting a fair trial. You were getting strung up at the nearest yardarm. Silver was wealth, yes, but it was also a curse, heavy, dangerous and harder to spend than you'd think. Exotic goods and awkward spoils. Beyond silver, pirates seized whatever exotic cargo they could. Chinese porcelain, Persian carpets, barrels of spices, exotic parrots or monkeys, destined for European menageries. Sounds luxurious, right? until you realize most of it spoiled, broke, or starved before it ever made it back to port. Take nutmeg, for example. Spices were incredibly valuable in Europe, sometimes worth more than gold by weight. But a barrel of nutmeg stored in a damp pirate hold would quickly go moldy. Same with sugar, same with flour. Rats gnawed through sacks of grain before you could blink. And then there were awkward items: pianos, furniture, religious relics. Not exactly the kind of stuff you can sell discreetly at a tavern. Imagine swaggering into a pirate port trying to offload a bishop's gilded lectern. Not many takers. Treasure was alcohol. The most immediate treasure? Alcohol. Rum, brandy, wine. Pirates treated liquor as better than gold. Why? Because it didn't need hauling. It could be consumed instantly, and it numbed the reality of living in a floating sewer. A captured ship's rum stores might be gone within days, drunk in wild, chaotic celebrations that ended with fistfights, broken bones, and occasionally a ship accidentally set on fire. If pirates buried anything, it was usually their comrades after a week-long binge. The pirate economy. So what happened to loot after a raid? Pirates needed fences, black market merchants who bought stolen goods at a discount. Islands like New Providence in the Bahamas, or Port Royal before it was destroyed by an earthquake, served as pirate eBay. A pirate might trade barrels of flour for a new cutlass, or swap stolen tobacco for prostitutes, gambling debts, or gunpowder. Gold and silver did show up, but it was more often turned into instant gratification, silk clothes, exotic food, or just more rum. For most pirates, wealth wasn't about storing treasure. It was about spending it before you died. That's why so many pirate ports were infamous for decadence. Nassau wasn't a gold vault. It was a non-stop party fueled by stolen sugar and cheap liquor. The treasure you don't want. There's another kind of treasure pirates often took: people. Enslaved Africans were one of the most horrific forms of loot, captured from slaver ships and resold elsewhere. Some pirates freed them and welcomed them into the crew. Blackbeard and Bartholomew Roberts both had mixed-race crews, but just as often they were treated as cargo. And this was part of the grim truth of piracy. Treasure wasn't always shiny. Sometimes it was human lives reduced to trade goods, not exactly the glamorous chest of jewels you imagined. The reality of pirate treasure. So let's reset the picture. You're not sitting on a sandy beach with a chest of gold. You're crouched in a stinking hold, counting mouldy sacks of flour while rats scurry over your bare feet. Your share of the loot is 3 pounds of tobacco, a rusty pistol, and maybe a small bag of coin if you're lucky. You'll blow through it in 2 days of drinking at the next port, then be right back on deck, starving, sick, and itching. And if by some miracle you did manage to gather wealth, you'd paint a target on your back. Governors hunted wealthy pirates relentlessly. Other pirates stole from each other. Even your own captain might cheat you. The truth is, the treasure was never the point. The point was freedom, the chance to live outside the law, however briefly. Treasure was just the excuse. And if you were foolish enough to believe the fairy tales, well, you'd be sorely disappointed by your soggy bag of acorns. Survival lesson. So why wouldn't you survive the pirate treasure hunt? Because there was no treasure worth surviving for. What Hollywood calls treasure was really junk, booze, or broken furniture. By the time you've carried your 50th barrel of worm-ridden flour through tropical heat, you'll be wondering why you didn't just stay home and sell turnips. And that's the secret pirates knew all along. The real treasure was the brief, violent freedom of living outside the rules. Everything else, the coins, the parrots, the chests of gold, that was just a story told later to make sense of a very short, very brutal life. You've survived scurvy gums, storms that nearly snapped the ship in two, and treasure that turned out to be mouldy flour. You've even made it through battles where splinters flew like arrows. So maybe you think you've proven yourself. Maybe you think you've earned a little trust, a place among the brotherhood of pirates. But here's the truth. The greatest danger on a pirate ship isn't the sea, the storm, or the navy. It's the men standing beside you. Because when food runs out, when loot disappoints, when tempers flare, betrayal is always waiting. And pirate justice, that's just a polite way of saying inventive murder. The thin line of pirate democracy. Much has been made of pirate democracy. The crew voted for their captains. They could remove them if they didn't like how things were going. Everyone had a share of loot, written down in the articles. To modern ears it sounds oddly progressive, a floating republic of rogues. But pirate democracy had sharp teeth. Step out of line and you didn't get a gentle slap on the wrist. You got flogged, branded, keel-hauled, or worse. And since the crew itself enforced the code, punishments weren't calm or measured. They were chaotic, drunken, and often fatal. So yes, you could vote. But if you voted wrong, or annoyed the wrong man, you might wake up bound to the mast, waiting for your skin to be peeled by barnacles. Mutiny, the constant shadow. Every day on a pirate ship, mutiny simmered just below the surface. Crews were bound by oaths, but also by desperation. If the captain was stingy with loot, or too cautious in battle, men whispered, knives sharpened. Dice cast in corners weren't always about games. One man's whisper could spark a mutiny. Maybe he thought the quartermaster was skimming shares. Maybe he believed the captain was hiding gold. Maybe he just wanted to seize command himself. And once suspicion spread, it was like a fever. Suddenly, no one trusted anyone. When mutiny came, it was brutal. A crew might rise up in the night, drag the captain from his cabin and put him on trial in front of jeering men. Trials were short, verdicts shorter, and sentences. Let's just say you didn't want to be on the losing side. Punishments of betrayal. What did pirates do to mutineers, thieves, or cowards? Let's count the ways. Marooning. You're rowed to a barren island, given a pistol with one shot, and left to die of thirst, starvation, or madness. Keel hauling. Bound with ropes, you're dragged under the hull, scraping across barnacles that tear your flesh like razors. Few survived. The plank. Rare, but when it happened it was humiliating. Forced to walk off the ship into the sea, crew laughing as you drowned. Flogging. Sometimes a punishment, sometimes just entertainment. A man whipped until his back was ribbons of flesh. Instant death. If the crew was angry enough, they didn't bother with rituals. One pistol shot, one cutlass slash. Done. And remember, pirate justice wasn't neat. It was messy, fueled by rum and rage. Desertion. No safe haven. Let's say you've had enough. You're done with the lice, the rot, the endless labor. You want out, so you sneak away at the next port. Desertion seems like freedom, but ports were full of informants. Navy officers paid locals to report deserters. If you were caught, it wasn't pirates you had to fear. It was the law. The British Admiralty hanged pirates by the dozen, sometimes 20 or 30 at a time, bodies left swinging for days. And if you weren't caught by the Navy, other pirates might drag you back. They hated deserters even more than traitors, because if one man escaped, others might get ideas. Justice for deserters was swift, flogging, branding, or a quick execution. Spies and sellouts. Not all betrayal came from inside. Some pirates sold out their own crews to save their skins. A captured man might offer names, routes, and hideouts in exchange for pardon. Governments encouraged this, promise a pardon, gain an informer. The result? Pirate crews constantly suspected spies among them. And suspicion was deadly. A man accused of spying didn't get a fair trial. He got tied to a rope, beaten, or shoved overboard. Even a false rumor could end you. On a pirate ship, paranoia was constant, and the punishment for mistrust was often blood. The rope always waits. In the end, betrayal and justice always ended the same way. The rope. Pirates lived with gallows hanging over their heads. Every betrayal, every mutiny, every desertion was haunted by the vision of dangling corpses. Governments loved to display pirate bodies as warnings. After execution, pirates were sometimes tarred and hung in iron cages called gibbets, left to rot along busy harbours. Seagulls picked at them, storms battered them, and sailors passed by staring at their swaying remains. The message was clear: justice catches everyone in the end. Why you wouldn't survive. And you wouldn't survive the paranoia. The whispers in the dark would break you before the whip ever touched your back. You'd never know if your shipmates were plotting mutiny, or if they suspected you were plotting one yourself. One wrong glance, one careless joke, and you'd wake with a rope around your neck. Pirate democracy wasn't freedom. It was a powder keg, always one spark away from chaos. And unless you were the spark, you'd be the one burned. You've clung to ropes in hurricanes, choked on cannon smoke, rotted in hammocks with scurvy, and hauled loot that turned out to be mouldy flour. You've endured mutinies, floggings, and rats chewing on your boots at night. Maybe you've even convinced yourself that if you can just hold on a little longer, you'll retire rich in some Caribbean paradise. But here's the final truth. Almost no pirate ever got that ending. Because in the end, piracy didn't give you freedom. It gave you the rope. Capture comes for everyone. No matter how fast your ship, No matter how clever your captain, eventually the law catches up. Pirates could outrun the navy for years, but one storm, one leak, one unlucky cannonball, and your days of plunder were over. Naval patrols grew ruthless in the early 18th century. Governors offered pardons to pirates willing to give up the trade, and hung the ones who didn't. Former pirate havens like Nassau became hunting grounds. Pirate crews shrank, ships deserted, and the ones who stayed found themselves cornered. You can imagine it, sails on the horizon, but this time they're not fat merchantmen. They're sleek warships, bristling with cannons, flags of kings flying in the wind. There's no running, no fighting, just the sudden realization that the game is up, trials and no mercy. If you were captured alive, you didn't get sympathy, you got a trial, and the outcome was already decided. Courts in London, Boston, Port Royal and Charleston ran conveyor belts of pirate justice. Dozens tried at once, witnesses lined up to tell tales of robbery, murder and treason. The defense? Maybe you claimed you'd been forced into piracy, maybe you begged for pardon. But unless you had friends in high places, the judge wasn't listening. Pirates were symbols of chaos, and the law loved nothing more than making an example out of them. The sentence was almost always death, the gallows, and so you'd find yourself marched through the streets in chains, jeered by crowds, children shouted insults, merchants spat, preachers pointed fingers and reminded everyone that you were God's warning against sin. At the gallows, ropes dangled like grim invitations. Sometimes pirates were hanged in groups of 20 or more, all swaying together in the sea breeze. The drop was short, designed not to break the neck, but to strangle. Faces purpled, tongues swelled, legs kicked helplessly. Crowds watched with relish, picnic baskets in hand. It was theatre, and you were the star until you stopped twitching. The gibbet. Death wasn't always the end. Some bodies were tarred to preserve them and hung in iron cages called gibbets, stationed along harbours or riverbanks. For months, years even, your corpse would creak in the wind, gulls pecking at your eyes, your bones slowly whitening in the sun. Every sailor passing by would see you swinging, and know the price of piracy. Imagine the stench. Imagine your soul, if you believed in such things, condemned to dangle in a cage while strangers pointed and laughed. That was the legacy of many a pirate. Legends versus reality. Of course some names escaped the rope. Blackbeard, Bartholomew Roberts, Anne Bonny, Mary Read. But even their stories ended in blood, prison or mystery. Blackbeard was shot and stabbed more than 20 times before he went down. Roberts caught a cannonball to the neck. Bonny and Read ended up in jail, their later lives forgotten. The few who lived long enough to grow old often died, broke, drunk, and forgotten in some backwater tavern. No piles of gold, no tropical retirements, just cirrhosis and regret. The real end. And that's the truth. The pirate's life was nasty, brutish, and short. The dream of freedom lasted as long as your luck held. But sooner or later, the sea, the sickness, the storm, or the noose claimed you, and you wouldn't have made it to the end. You'd have fallen long before, maybe with a splinter through your chest in battle, maybe with scurvy rotting your gums, maybe with the quartermaster's whip across your back, or maybe you'd just hang quietly in the breeze, another nameless body feeding the crows. Piracy promised freedom. What it delivered was death, why you wouldn't survive. So let's be clear, you wouldn't survive the pirate's end, because nobody really did. Treasure rotted, democracy turned to paranoia, and every hammock was a coffin waiting to be filled. The pirate's life wasn't adventure, it was a countdown, and yours would have reached zero long before the gallows.